Jeremy, you've spent a good deal of time in Yemen with the al-Alaki family investigating the various attacks.
First of all, I just want to make clear here that Abdulrahman al-Alaki, this 16-year-old who was killed in the drone strike, was not with his father at the time that he was killed. He was killed 2 weeks later while sitting in an outdoor restaurant with his teenage cousins and other youth from their tribe. He had run away from home to try to find his father, and his father was killed before he could find him. In fact, his father was killed nowhere near where he was. Abdulrahman went to the place in Shabwa where there had been repeated drone strikes aimed at killing his father. His father gets killed, and Abdulrahman is stuck in this village because at the time the Arab Spring uprisings were happening, and there were protests against Ali Abdullah Saleh, the US-backed dictator of Yemen, and he was unable to return to his home where he was living with Nasser al-Alaki and his wife Saleha because there was fighting in the south of the country. So he's waiting and staying with his relatives, and then he's killed in this drone strike. And when he was killed, anonymous U.S. officials claimed that he was a 21-year-old, that he was somehow with al-Qaeda figures, or that he may have actually been a militant himself. And all of this was being litigated anonymously. And then the family produced his birth certificate showing that he had just turned 16, that he was born in August of 1995 in Denver, Colorado. I have spent the past year or more trying to get to the bottom of why this young man was killed. I've spent time with his family, with his friends, with people who knew him well. There is not a shred of evidence to indicate that this boy had anything to do with terrorism whatsoever. He was being raised by his grandparents and had dreams of going to university in the United States. For me, the answer to why he was killed says a lot about who we are as a society. And the Obama administration has refused to come forward and say why this 16-year-old American citizen was killed. Eric Holder, the Attorney General, used the phrase, "he was not specifically targeted." What does that mean? It's some kind of Orwellian term that was probably focus grouped in the CIA. It sounds like this hyper-legalistic term. Was he killed in a signature strike? These drone strikes that are aimed at people whose identities we don't know and against whom we may have no evidence that they participated in criminal or terrorist activity. This is sort of like pre-crime, like Minority Report. Where we are targeting people even though we don't know their exact identities. A former senior official in the White House told me that John Brennan, the current director of the CIA, believed that Abdulrahman al-Alaki may have been intentionally targeted, perhaps based on bad intelligence. But this administration, I think, has an obligation to the American people to explain this. On the case of Anwar al-Awlaki, just to respond to a couple of things that Nasser and Sheikh Saleh bin Farid said, I think that many Americans would watch sermons of Anwar al-Awlaki and find them deeply offensive. Anwar al-Awlaki, toward the end of his life, was openly calling for armed jihad against the United States, was calling on Muslims within the military to attack other soldiers, similar to the Nadal Hassan and the Fort Hood massacre. But what I think is important for people to understand is this man was never indicted. Was never charged with a crime. I'm willing to concede that he may have been involved with plots against the United States. But if President Obama is sincere in saying that he would have preferred to prosecute him, why didn't someone call Saleh bin Farid, who is one of the most influential tribal leaders in the South, a British-educated man, an international businessman who would have had a serious stake in this, and say to him, here's the evidence against Anwar al-Awlaki, we want him handed over. It gives lie to the claim by President Obama that they would have preferred to capture him or put him on trial. The fact that these tribal leaders were not even approached or presented with any evidence. So, this isn't about so much who Anwar al-Awlaki was. This is about who we are as a society. When you have the constitutional law professor, Nobel Peace Prize winning Democratic president asserting now openly that the United States has the right to assassinate its own citizens off of a declared battlefield without even presenting evidence that they're involved with a crime, then I think we have a serious problem in this country that needs to be confronted.
Jeremy, I want to go to a clip of your new film that's opening today, Dirty Wars, when you interview Democratic Senator Ron Wyden, who sits on the Senate Intelligence Committee.
When there is a lethal operation and a high-value person is killed, the president, of course, acknowledged that we killed.
He can't confirm that there have been illegal operations outside of war zone.
Has there been any legal review of the potential for lethal operations against American citizens?
Is that classified? It's important for the American people to know when the president can kill an American citizen and when they can't. And yet it is almost as if there are two laws in America. And the American people would be extraordinarily surprised if they could see the difference between what they believe a law says and how it has actually been interpreted in secret.
You're not permitted to disclose that difference publicly.
That's correct.
That's Democratic Senator Ron Wyden, who sits on the Senate Intelligence Committee, being questioned by Jeremy Scahill in his new film, Dirty Wars. Jeremy.
Right. I mean, the state of oversight today for the kill program is that senators like Ron Wyden go into a secure classified intelligence facility. They're provided with only some memos that the White House has determined it's willing to share with members of Congress from the Intelligence Committee. And they are not allowed to bring writing utensils in. They can't bring paper in. They can't bring anything with a battery into these rooms. And they read the administration's justification for conducting these strikes. And then they're not allowed to tell anyone what they've seen when they're in that room. So, for me, the stakes here are very high because we have an assertion now openly and publicly by the President of the United States that he believes that we have the right to conduct these operations in any country where there is a potential threat against U.S. persons. And, I believe that President Obama should be required to present evidence that American citizens are involved with criminal or terrorist activities before sentencing them to death. And let's remember, the vast majority of the victims are not U.S. citizens. They're Yemenis and Pakistanis and Somalis and others around the world.